Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. And thank you so much for those lovely bird sounds in the background. It's giving us a little insight into where we all are all sitting at this moment in time. However, you may want to hit mute. Although we love the bird sounds, it probably won't add a lot to this conversation this morning. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about why we are doing this. As we all are facing the situation with the virus, we as advisors, as COIs to other advisors, and as clients need to understand this ecosystem that has been put upon us by this virus. And as we are starting to work closely with clients that were either A, going to be selling this spring in the major auctions, B, going to be selling in some of the specialized auctions, in which Carrie Jeffries will provide us some insight into, C, we're planning trips to New York to acquire artworks, D, we're currently collateralizing their collections and needed valuations or needed valuations for insurance, or one of the biggest problems, logistics. So as we were doing our due diligence to prepare for our clients and to provide advice that we think was best for them, we realized that we were gathering information we felt we should share with everyone. So this is an opportunity for everyone to get a better understanding of A, what's happening in the auction marketplace, what are the new schedules, what are the new opportunities, what are our opinions about those sales. It is going to give us an opportunity to understand some of the good, specialized sales that are out there for both acquisition and for sale that are still happening in the spring. We wanted to help clients understand the art insurance ecosystem because everything has changed and we needed someone very smart in the room and an adult to provide advice. So we're going to have that today with Mary Puntillo from DeWitt Stern. And we also want to understand what's happening in terms of appraisals, as not a lot of our clients are opening their doors for us to go in and do valuations. So with that in mind, we've brought on our team and we are each going to give you some insight. This is interactive. Please feel free to use the chat box and ask any questions while we are presenting so that we can address them. In addition, we will be recording this and you will be able to refer to it at a later time as well. So let's begin. We're going to start with a discussion of the auction marketplace. So let's move forward with that. Now, Roxanne Cohen is going to take us through what's happening in the auction marketplace. We do not need to look, she's not going to summarize what's on this screen, but we really want to talk about a couple questions around auctions. So Roxanne is our Director of Art Advisory. She manages our largest clients for acquisition and sales. And so Roxanne, I know that you come from an auction background. Can you give us a little sense of how Sotheby's and Christie's have readjusted to prepare for this new world we're living in for the spring?
Hi, everyone. I hope you're well at home. We've been following galleries and auction houses quite closely at the moment. And with a lot of the larger galleries and auction houses, they already have online digital platforms in place. So a lot of them have been expanding their online offerings to include more information and also more better viewing capabilities for current shows and private sales, which is somewhat of an opportunity for there to be more transparency in the art world, because I know a lot of people do make comments that sometimes have transparency at the moment. Last week, Art Basel Hong Kong went online for the first time, where we saw for the first time that a lot. Oh, hello.
Hi, Anne. Good. How are you doing? No, we're working remotely. I'm here alone. The man, a repairman, is very quiet here. I'm getting a lot done. Yeah.
Hi, can everyone please mute so that we can have a very efficient webinar today? The only time you should unmute is if you are speaking. And please use the chat box for communication. So if everyone could please mute, it would be very much appreciated.
Sorry. Hi, I'm back now. Oh, no. So, okay. A lot of the auction houses have moved most of the big post-war contemporary impressionist.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I get very superstitious talking about losses, so I was touching wood at the exact same time. And I always change the subject when people say that. But anyway,
you may want to mute. I believe we can hear your telephone conversation.
Hi, are we? Thank you. Hi. So most of the bigger auction houses, Sotheby's, Christie's, and Phillips, have readjusted the spring sales. A little bit of insight. Most of the information is on the document that we have online, but just a quick update is that all the big sales that happen in spring in New York are now which are post-war and contemporary and design, American art. They've all been rescheduled to the last week of June in New York. This is usually a time where London has their big sales, which usually follow on from the Basel, Switzerland opening. But as that's been cancelled, they decided to merge both the London and New York big spring sales and host them at the end of June in New York. And we hope by then that, things will start moving, hopefully, by May at least, where the world will hopefully get back on its feet if we're following on from where China is at the moment and they've kind of started to open up.
Roxanne, can you please provide us your opinion? Let's say you're a client who was planning to sell in the May auctions and you have a significant work. What are your thoughts in terms of the London sale the New York sale in June versus holding back and waiting until the fall? Do you believe that the June sales should be a positive sales season?
Yeah, in terms of if we look back to in 2008 when, the world was going through a hard time in recession, the record that we have is that good quality art will always sell well. So I think, when clients are looking to sell a work, if it's in June or November, we really have to kind of analyze what type of work do they have? Is there still demand for that artist? Is it a great quality work by great artists with still demand? I would say June would still be a good time. A lot of the middle market sometimes might suffer a little bit, where I would maybe to certain clients to hold back till November until everything's kind of back up running on its feet again.
One more question. Do you think that as the auction marketplace is becoming, all the auctions are suffering and all the auction houses are very, very, interested in getting as much material in as possible in June, and who knows, it may move into July. Do you think that gives the seller a better opportunity for negotiation?
I think during this time, as there's no art fairs, gallery openings, there's no auctions. I'm starting to see that everyone is really turning to private sale. Both the larger auction houses and galleries have expanded their online platform, giving people access and more access than they've ever had before. And in a way, it's easier to engage with these clients. There's no social distractions. people are sitting at home all day. They're on the internet looking at various different things. So I think there's an opportunity for people to engage more. I also think that this could benefit both parties. There's inevitably less demands where there should be more for certain clients to be able to buy works they previously wouldn't have, been able to have access to, or the prices, I think, in time will start to drop for works that might have been on the market for a while. That said, top quality works, blue chip artists will always sell well. So I still think it's a time where people need to stay focused on stable artists that have a good secondary market, because those are the works that will stand over time.
So let me ask, one more question. So let's say you have a good work, and you want to sell that good work. What do you think, in terms of process, what would your recommendations be? Would you suggest private sale opportunity first, and then with the thought process of going to auction? Like, what are your thoughts in terms of anyone individual who has a work that they would like to sell today that is of quality?
I think that, number one, the first thing is to really analyze the work. Would that work specifically do better to a wider audience going to auction? Is it more of a niche market that maybe it should be sold privately? But generally speaking, I think at the moment there's really good opportunity for private sale. As I said, there's a lot of people are starting to engage. A lot of people are contacting to, start to acquire artwork as an alternative asset. So I would potentially try private sale first. You can also, with private sale, you have more control over what your price is, what you're getting at the end of the day. Auction is a great source as well, but in the immediate time where there's no auctions, I think private sale is a good opportunity for people.
Okay, take us through Art Basel. There's some very interesting things happening for Art Basel, something that's never happened before. Can you give us some insight to what they've done? I mean, after all, I saw an email today that said 250,000 people have logged on to that online platform.
So it's obviously, it was the first time Art Basel or any art fair's really been quite virtual. They had, the first day they had a problem with too many people logging on to the site. This was during the first day, which was the VIP day. The Art Basel has obviously given everyone, they're giving everyone more access. So when you go online, a lot of galleries have included the prices of works, which they never usually do, because they want people to go to their booth to have the conversation with them, to talk about the work and then the pricing. Also online, they've stated if works have been sold or not sold. And I think this has been a way, to make business more efficient with one another. So, they know when people are contacting them, it's only because they're very serious in a specific work. That said, I think Basel would have ended up not being able to engage with new collectors and people that aren't as familiar with art fairs. And I think they engaged very well with galleries' current VIP clients, but I'd be interested to know after the VIP openings, how many people actually logged on to look at all the gallery presentations. But we might start to see that art fairs might start to, go online. They might do a week of a fair and then maybe go online the last few days.
Thank you so much, Roxanne. Okay, so anything else you'd like to add that I haven't mentioned in regards to the major sales coming up or what's happening with the dealer marketplace? I mean, specifically, do you want to mention quickly what's happening with the dealer marketplace, all the major dealers, and how are they handling this scenario?
I think a lot of people, I would say a lot of people that want to buy art are immediately kind of jumping on the bandwagon, expecting that there's going to be major discounts at the moment. You know, as I said before, that if you have a very good work of art by a very good artist, you know, you shouldn't have to, you know, there shouldn't be major discounts at the moment. I think maybe in a couple of weeks' time where, you know, the dust settles a bit, people might want to offload more, but in this immediate time, there's not major discounts. There'll be some discounts, but a lot of dealers are kind of trying to do as many private sales as possible. And there are opportunities to come across works that you would never get to see at auction, because a lot of people like to sell privately. But I would also say that in this market, there's no rush and there's less demand, less competition. So there should be more opportunities for you and you should also make more thoughtful purchases. Any work purchased during this time really should stand, you know, to be a good investment over a long period of time.
Thanks so much. Thank you very much, Roxanne. And we're now going to be talking to Carrie Jeffrey. Carrie Jeffrey is our National Consignment Director. And part of the work we do is we really try to have a good understanding of every single auction house in the United States. We want to understand what the sweet spot is. We want to understand their sale-through rate. We want to understand the revenue. And so Carrie has done kind of a deep analysis of what we call, and it's not a derogatory term, it's just a fact, the second-tier auction houses, meaning not one of the big three, and also looking at some of those auction houses that have real specializations in different areas of collecting categories. So Carrie, it would be wonderful if you could share with us, you know, as we're bouncing off Roxanne's comments, you know, what are you seeing? Let's start with the second tier auction houses, you know, your Bonhams, Doyles, Freemans, Leslie Hymans of the world. What are you seeing with those auction houses currently?
Well, good morning, everyone. Following on what Roxanne had said, she's really looking at the auctions that have their main sale rooms are in New York and London. Many of the regional auction houses are outside of those areas and so aren't as restricted by New York laws, by London's current lockdowns. And so what we're seeing is some regional houses, Ohio, Heritage in Dallas, Freeman's in Philadelphia, Leslie Hyman in Chicago. They are actually it's easier for them to adapt to this current scenario. They have their sales that were already cataloged, already photographed, already listed online, were easily transformed into online-only sales with good activity and bidding as everyone is at home and focused on the computer. And Heritage, for instance, with Texas not being as stringent in terms of its lockdown policy, Heritage's sales are continuing as planned. Heritage is probably considered one of the top tier auction houses alongside Sotheby's and Christie's, and they already have a strong practice in place of online sales and a success with online sales that can do significantly well with outside of exhibitions, outside of printed catalogs. And that is also something to consider. These auction houses, there are other reasons why sales can't take place. There are condition reports that are needed. There are catalogs that need to be printed. Many of those are printed overseas. So all of those are being taken into consideration. Auction houses, however, are adapting to meet the demands of clients that still have an appetite to buy. And there's significant online bidding activity. So we are seeing that these regional houses are switching to online-only formats. They are seeing the same number of registered bidders. They are seeing bids placed in the high six figures for online sales. So this is just talking regionally for these houses that have the same categories like Sotheby's and Christie's, so fine art departments, furnish and decorative arts departments, jewelry departments. They are looking to switch those categories to online only and postpone specific sales till later, till May, till early June, when those categories would need an exhibition. As Anita mentioned, there are certain specialty categories that we have been following very, very closely. These categories include numismatics, so coins, sports memorabilia, entertainment memorabilia, wine and spirits, and rare books. These types of categories are actually the anomalies in this entire change to the market. These categories perform well outside of exhibitions. They perform well outside of printed catalogs, and online sales is where they usually do well. A good example for this is a specialized auction venue in Southern California called Stack's Bauer. They are a specialized auction house that sells only numismatics, so collectible coins, printed currency. Their sales this week took place in an online-only format, a series of sales over a number of days without live bidding, without in-person bidding, I should say. By the end of the week, those sales will total $37 million in hammer. This is all happening very quietly when outside of the New York sales that are essentially shut down for live sales. Buyers have a strong appetite to direct their buying to more tangible assets, and coins have seen a significant shift up. It's a very stable collecting category. 3 of the assets that they sold this week hammered above $1 million, with many of the bids leading up to the final hammer price coming in an online format, being placed through the online portal, the bidding platform. Other areas where we see that will thrive in this sort of market would be wine and spirits. Again, these are categories that do not need the full fanfare of an exhibition. They do not need to be seen in person. They do not need a full printed catalog. The same can be said for collectible sports memorabilia, for collectible baseball cards, for rare books, maps, and manuscripts. These areas have a universal grading system, meaning in some cases, clients don't even need to see a picture of some of these pieces. They are known items, and with independent grading, clients can sort of buy with confidence without having seen something in person. And all of these categories really have an established track record to sell well in another context. So we're seeing very, very strong results in active bidding in those areas. I feel with clients with some uncertainty in the finance, with uncertainty in the finance markets, we're definitely seeing a trend to readjusting their portfolio to acquire different assets and alternative assets like rare coins. It's a very sort of stable area to invest in. And we can see that through the results from the specialty houses.
So Carrie, let's get down to specific advice. So if you have certain assets, which assets do you think are really good to sell in this market? We're talking about the specialty assets.
We are seeing that, obviously as I mentioned, the results at Stack Bauer, the coin market is incredibly high. Obviously that is driven by the price of gold as well as the rarity of the coins. Coins can be easily shipped. They can be easily stored. They are assets that can trade within 10% of their hammer price the very next day. So it's a very liquid asset. And that can't be said across all categories. We are also seeing that there are some middle range sales that are still doing very well in terms of other categories for decorative arts and furniture, that usually, just from a more decorative standpoints, we're not saying high value, but there are good acquisitions there, there are good opportunities for sale, purely because a lot of the clients are more heavily engaged than they have ever been before, just due to millions of people being on lockdown. So we're actually seeing, through market analytics, through other online platforms such as First Dibs, that clients still have this healthy appetite to acquire, even if they can't have something in hand right away. If shipping is delayed, there are other avenues for that. We're still seeing traction to buy. But I would say it's sort of strong categories for sale, definitely coins, jewelry to some extent, where I believe, you know, that's following the same avenue as the coins, where it's an asset that really does hold intrinsic value. And so a lot of clients we're seeing are looking to acquire jewelry for investment. It's a good time to sell. And then the other categories, as I mentioned, sports memorabilia, it's entertainment memorabilia. Again, there's a strong, healthy market there. These are small assets that are easily held. They are easily sold outside of being seen in person. So it's a very sort of liquid asset that can be turned over very quickly as the need arises.
Thank you so much, Carrie. So let's move on to the next topic, and I'm going to talk a little bit about opportunities in the market. The first thing I would say is that, as Roxanne mentioned, and it's certainly in the second tier auction houses as well as the specialty auction houses, at some point people are going to say, you know what, I don't want to sell right now. So people that can make that choice, that have that choice, may be holding back to sell in the fall. However, when we're looking at estates that have to sell, when we're looking at forced liquidation, we are going to see a lot of opportunity for acquisition in the marketplace. And that is primarily because people will be forced to sell, and hence there may be no reserve, and or the price just may be very, very attractive. So we are certainly looking extremely carefully at every auction that is currently up now and will be selling in the future throughout the spring for our clients. Now, that being said, that requires extensive due diligence if in fact you're interested in acquiring works of art that have an asset value. Now, I just want to quickly talk about how you can determine if a piece coming up in the market does in fact have asset value. As a firm and as advisors, we really look at 9 categories to determine if one object has a good asset value. And when we go to auction on behalf of our clients, we actually do those analytics, do that analysis to determine what the asset value is and what is the price to be paid. So if you're looking at the market at some of the auctions coming up and you're trying to decide, should I buy that work? You want to keep in mind a few things. One, you want to make sure that artist sells in the marketplace, the secondary market or auction marketplace. If it's an artist that has just newly entered the marketplace, you want to stay away in terms, if you're looking for an asset acquisition. You want to look at the medium. So you want to make sure that the work of art is as original as possible. So oil and canvas, acrylic, and value going down with each medium, right? Watercolor, gouache, ink. So try to go for an original work of art, and you want to be, you know, the preeminent example of the medium. You want the subject matter that is representative of the artist. Good example would be, you know, you wouldn't want to pick a N.C. Wyeth painting that was not illustrative, and you know, for instance, his landscapes do not sell the same way that his, works that are illustrative do. You want to look at the size, not too small, right? And you also want to look at the provenance, who owned it before. You want to look at whether or not it's sold in the market before, which will have a big impact on value. And you want to, if it's a bronze, you want to look at rarity. If it's a print, you want it to be a small edition size. So all of those things you want to take into account. And if I like to say that if there's a B+ or more next to each of those categories of analysis, what you have is a good opportunity. And then you want to make sure the price is right. So I think there's going to be great opportunity in the marketplace for acquisition at auction. You must do your due diligence. And lastly, don't forget condition. You need to ask for condition reports, and usually above a certain threshold, you may want to send in someone independent to do that condition report for you. So I think it's going to be a buyer's market in many respects, unless you're selling in some of those specialty auctions that Kerry has referred to. In addition, there are other ways in which today you can take the art that you've collected that is literally sitting in storage, of which we have many clients that acquire works for asset acquisition purposes, or they're sitting in Europe. And there are other things you can do with that art to create some revenue. So for instance, collateralization, financing of the artwork. If you have strong blue chip artists, this might be a great time to find out what the value is and whether or not it's appropriate for collateralization, because you may be able to get a loan against the art and use it for other areas of your business that require funding today. It may actually be one of the only liquid assets you have, which is kind of counterintuitive to the art market. So if in fact that is the case, find out what the value is at marketable or fair market value, and then see what kind of loan you can get, which is typically 50% loan to value. There are lots of companies that do this, both recourse, i.e. your bank, or non-recourse, a lot of the private groups that will finance your art. We can help you with that and put you with the right team, and also provide you some sense of the value. The last thing is there are other financing opportunities that are just coming into the market. And, for example, you may want to look at an art bond, which is a potential way for you to actually create revenue from your collection. There are companies now, one in particular, that have created art bonds, and that may be a really great opportunity for you to take a collection you have, get a recurring revenue model from it, and then utilize it in a way that can bring additional, financing or money in your pocket. So there are opportunities in the market, but you have to make sure you do your due diligence. Now, this is the part sometimes we all forget, but may be the most important in many respects. And that is, during times of disruption, you want to make sure that you understand all the nuances of the insurance for your collections. And there are things you're not thinking about that are going to that are going to be very, very important. So we brought on what I consider to be one of the most knowledgeable in the space, Mary Pontillo. And Mary, I was hoping you could share with us some of the things we should consider in terms of our insurance. And what I wanted to start with is, we have this ourselves. Many of our clients are exhibiting works of art. We have loan agreements out with various museums. Can you give us a little insight into anything we should be considering in terms of our loan agreements and how that relates to insurance today?
Sure. Thanks so much, Anita. So I would say if you have any loan or consignment agreements out right now, so either a museum, an auction house, a gallery is holding on to your artwork, that you need to take a really close look at that contract. So you need to make sure that the contract aligns with extended dates you may need. Read that contract and see if the contract's based on specific dates, or perhaps it does say something to the effect of that this contract is valid from on a wall-to-wall or nail-to-nail basis. So basically from the time an artwork is collected from you until it's returned to you or sold. And you want to ensure that the insurance provision of that contract aligns with the dates on the contract. And just keep in mind, no matter what a certificate of insurance says, that the contract is king if there's any sort of loss. You also might want to just take a few moments to call or email the entity and ask them about the security precautions. You know, most galleries and museums don't have staff in them right now. So just a confirmation that those alarms are connected to, say, the local police and fire departments, that in most cases, these organizations can access their security remotely as well, their cameras rather. Then also think about if you lent your work to a museum for a rather large exhibition or a gallery for a large exhibition, high valued exhibition, and say that museum or gallery needed to take out an increase to their policy limits to support the total values at that location, you want to ask that if that was the case, and you might have to ask the question because you might not have known they had to do that. You can make some assumptions based on the, you know, the total values that you would assume to be there, that they actually extended this insurance increase as well. And you can ask for an updated certificate of insurance just to give you another level of comfort. The other thing to think about from an insurance standpoint with works on loan is June 1st is the beginning of hurricane season. So if your items, I mean, hopefully all this will be done and your artwork will be at its final place before June 1st. But if it's still in limbo, it's still somewhere else, is that location a coastal location? Could it be subject to hurricane? Just ask some questions surrounding hurricane. You know, do they have a sublimit or coverage or an exclusion or high deductibles for wind, hurricane, flooding? The last piece on this that's really important, and it's a habit that people should be in all the time, but I know some people either don't know about it or don't consistently do this, is that for any works that are out on loan or consignment, you should have a UCC filing, and that means Uniform Commercial Code. This is the part of law that dictates the exchange of goods, and fine art falls under that. So if you have a UCC filing on your piece, that creates a secured lender relationship. If the organization that is holding your artwork now goes into bankruptcy, this will mean that you'll be in line to get that piece back during the bankruptcy proceedings. If you don't have a UCC filing in place, during the bankruptcy proceedings, you may not be able to get your piece back, even if you have a consignment or loan agreement in place. So I'd say that those are the most important things to think about from a very technical insurance standpoint.
Mary, that's really, really good information for us because, as you know, as the economy is taking a very strong hit right now, we don't know whether or not the institution that we've lent to will, in fact, still be there when this is all done. So that's excellent, excellent advice.
I know it's glum, but you need to make sure you're protecting your assets.
Exactly. Can you give us a little insight into what we think, like in terms of from an insurance perspective and insuring a collection to value, how important is it when there's a significant downturn or upturn to have your collections looked at again for valuation?
Right. So a lot of this is going to depend on the valuation clause on your policy, which is what you would get paid out in the event of a loss. So absolutely, if you have a policy, some people think current market value is the be all and end all, like that's super flexible. So if the market increases, then I'm going to get the upside. Well, you also in this case need to be worried about a potential downside. I mean, as you spoke about earlier in the call, I mean, blue chip artwork will probably hold its value, but other artwork may not. So you really want to make sure that if you have number one, that if you have a policy that's strictly a scheduled value policy or an agreed value policy, that those values are updated, that you make sure that every single piece of artwork you own is on that list. You may have a blanket, we say a blanket limit of some things that are, say, anything under $10,000 up to a total of $100,000. So those things are okay on a blanket basis, but you really want to make sure that those values are updated on a scheduled basis. And if you do, for some reason, just have a current market value policy, you really need to think about that right now, because a current market value policy could leave you getting less for a piece of artwork in the event of a claim than you paid for it if the market sees a downturn with the specific artists and artworks that you own. In addition, some people will have some free time on their hands. And I think if you do have a little bit of free time working on that inventory project that you've been putting off and putting off and putting off, this is the perfect time to work on that. And I know Anita, people like Paul Mall can definitely help with something like an inventory project, even if it's virtually.
Yeah, no, thank you. So like step one is kind of, I guess what you're saying is figure out what you have. Step two, review your documents and see what the valuations are currently and what the language is in the document, the insurance document. And step three, if you already have a valuation, you can simply have a reval done from a desktop appraisal approach, correct?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, insurance companies are pretty flexible for the most part about what kind of documentation they'll accept, and obviously a formal appraisal is the most, the most advantageous, and that's what's most preferred.
All right, now the big issue that we're facing right now, just dealt with it this morning, is the issue around logistics, shipping, storage, et cetera. What are you hearing in the marketplace from that perspective? And is there any insurance considerations around that as well?
Yeah, so again, I would go back to any kind of contracts with regard to insurance. If someone else has your property, you need to make sure that those things are insured even while in storage. From a perspective of, say, you're a private collector and you have artwork in storage, I think there's a couple things to think about. Number one, we actually insure quite a few warehouses, so we've been in very close contact with them. Almost all of these facilities have the ability to monitor their cameras and alarm systems remotely. In the state of New York, warehouse employees were deemed essential employees. So almost all of these warehouses are having someone go in and do a physical wellness check on the building every day as well. Fortunately, also key people like plumbers and electricians are also considered essential employees. So if any of the storage locations did have an issue, with a leaky pipe or anything like that, they will discover it on the wellness check and or via their motion detectors on their security cameras and their security systems. And they could have someone respond. So that's good to know that all those checks and balances are in place. Also keep in mind most of these warehouses alarms are connected to a local police and fire department, so that's all still in place as well. So I feel very comfortable with artwork being in storage locations right now. The other thing to think about though is, in the art world, it can be a very funny thing with a lot of very strong personalities, and some people really want their art moved right now. And just because a storage location and warehousing is deemed essential doesn't mean that it's essential that your artwork get moved. So I think people still need to use some common sense and remember that art warehousing leaders and owners are also trying to protect the interests and the safety and the health of their employees as well, which is frankly way more important than moving art around. So I think those are some things I would keep in mind with regard to storage during this time.
Okay, my last question is just an opinion question about insurance, which is, in all the work you've done, looking at clients' collections and their insurance, is there one area where you see the biggest gap in the way people typically have their artworks insured?
I think there's a couple things. One would be, going back to the value issue. Somebody buys a painting or an artwork, a sculpture 5 years ago, and they're super happy. They're really proud of themselves because I have it scheduled on their policy, but then they never update the value. So, if that artwork is increased in value, you're potentially left with a shortfall if you don't increase the value on your insurance policy. The other thing is, also taking a look at your values per location. I mean, some people are really going to be looking to save money right now, especially small business owners. And say you're a small business owner that also has a collection and you're insuring your collection across 4 different homes. You can also take a look at insuring to your highest valued location or your probable maximum loss, meaning if something happened to one location, what would the total value of artwork there be that could potentially be destroyed? And that's a way to think a little more creatively about your insurance program right now. And the last little piece on the insurance side, which falls a little bit outside of your question, but I think the 2 parts of insurance that I really would love people to think about, because I think if something like this happens, it might just unravel a person at this point, is cyber insurance and wire transfer fraud. Number one, our company is asking people to do wire transfers wherever possible because otherwise someone has to deal with a physical check. And I like to tell people to just go analog. So this is more some risk management advice. Go analog, pick up the phone, confirm the wire transfer information with someone before you release a transfer for a large amount for an artwork or even just a smaller bill you might be paying. The other thing is cyber insurance, where We have seen a huge uptick just in the last 2 weeks of ransomware attacks and phishing. I don't know about you, but I must have received, 50 emails a day about COVID-19 with attachments from people I haven't heard of. And to just, number one, be really careful before you open up any emails, and absolutely careful before you click on attachments or links, especially if it's from someone you don't know. And consider thinking about purchasing cyber insurance, because if you did have some sort of hack into your system or a ransomware attack, you would have someone to call to help you through the whole thing, help you figure out what happened, and fix your system. So those are some tips for, some gaps I see people having.
Thank you so much, Mary. This was very, very informative. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure there'll be some, some follow-up questions as well. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me, Anita.
Of course. So last but certainly not least is the issue around valuation. And of course, Mary's teed that up very effectively. And we've all had to think outside the box. Here we go again with thinking outside the box as it relates to how to still assist our clients with things they really need done, such as valuation. So I've brought Kate, our director of appraisals, on this particular conversation to talk a little bit about the appraisal process and how it's been adjusted for the issues around the virus. So Kate, why don't you take it off?
Absolutely. Thank you, Anita. So we all know that a large portion of our business has always been in appraisals, has been seeing pieces on site, whether in clients' homes or galleries or institutions, and no matter what the use might be. And so because of all of the changes recently, and because we also don't know what the timeline is, we've really taken this opportunity to devise a better plan for desktop appraisals, which basically means we are bringing the objects to the appraisers and specialists digitally. And so it's the same specialists, the same appraisers that we would normally be sending on site, but it's a great opportunity for, especially for clients that in general don't have a large number of pieces, clients who are maybe located or have their pieces in a place that's less accessible. And now it's for all of our clients, no matter where they are, who are on quarantine of any kind. And so we're able to do those remotely at this point for the majority of items that our clients have us looking at. This is what's on the slide right now is actually directly from our website. So all this information is there as well, with information that we would need in order to do a desktop appraisal for any object. And obviously there are going to be exceptions to all of these rules, but for the most part, this is the information that we need. Anything generally that that the client has that's related to, obviously we're going to need images, any details about who made it, the material in general, jewelry, any of the information relating to purchase information or old schedules. Old schedules and old appraisals are incredibly helpful, especially when we're trying to work remotely like this. We hear clients say often, well, I have a schedule or I have an appraisal and it's 15 years old, so it's out of date and you won't need this or want this, but actually it can be incredibly helpful. So these are all things that we can do, and you have my contact information in our teams, and we're always happy to review the information ahead of time to see if it's possible to do a desktop appraisal for a client.
And can you tell everyone, like, what does it really mean to do a schedule review? What does that mean?
Sure. So a lot of our clients and or more often their brokers will send us a schedule just for our team of generalist appraisers and specialists to review and make sure that all the values look appropriate. If they are typically if they're about 15% too high or too low, we'll recommend that a reappraisal take place. And again, this was mentioned earlier in the presentation, but also as I just mentioned, we can do that virtually. If it was an appraisal that we did a number of years ago, we can do a reappraisal and we have the information. Most likely though, if there's a schedule, if there's enough information or the client still has, it's accessible, the object, then we can do it remotely for them as well. But it's a good way to keep track of what's going on in the market, especially these times of change. We will have our entire team, including all of our specialists, review that, whether it's jewelry, fine art, furniture, rugs, we have an appropriate specialist to review it.
Now, this just happened to me this morning prior to the webinar, and I think it would be really great if you could articulate this to the client. to the clients and COIs on this call. So I got a call from an old client, and the client said, listen, you did a valuation for us, 8 years ago. And I just got, an email from Sotheby's who sent me a comparable to the work that you valued, and it looks to be lower than the amount that you valued it for. Can you change my appraisal for retail replacement value to the sale price from Sotheby's? So, Kate, I find this to be a typical issue for clients in that they don't actually understand value. Can you talk about, what are the different kinds of values for an object and how clients can better understand the kind of value they need for insurance?
Of course. And as you mentioned, we go through this all of the time. And I think the most important thing is that clients, especially now when people are really homebound, are really tied to Googling, and they'll pull up whatever pops up and they assume that that's the current value on an object. And maybe it's an auction article. Maybe it is a result from auction. Maybe it's something that comes up on something like First Dibs or Cherish. And what we see are that clients typically don't really understand what that value means. And for the, just for ease, I'll say that there are really two main types of values. One, it would be retail replacement value, which is what you use for insurance, and primarily only insurance. And that is something that would be based on dealers, based on some of those retail sites like First Dibs that clients see when they Google, looking at any sort of a retail scenario for an object and what it would sell for and what we consider the primary market. That would also be the same for, we see a lot of clients now, especially with young collectors who are buying directly from galleries, younger artists and artists who are still developing, and they may not have a secondary market, which would be auction. And so we're really looking at that primary gallery market for those objects. And if a client were to Google, say, that artist, and any auction records did come up, they would probably be significantly swayed. And so for insurance, we always want to use retail replacement value because we're looking at if the client did have a complete loss, and they needed that piece replaced, we want them to be able to replace it and have the funds to replace it in a short period of time. Meaning if that painting fell off the wall and was damaged, let's say everybody's at home and the children are playing ball in the house because it's raining and they can't go anywhere else, and that piece is completely destroyed, they want to make sure that they can call a gallery or a dealer or the artist directly and replace that piece immediately with something as comparable as possible, to also include tax, shipping, framing, all of the issues that go into purchasing a piece and getting it to your home and having it put back on the wall or back in the place that it is. What we see, though, is that a lot of clients will look at things that are going on at auction and use that as a comparable, where auction is really a fair market value. And that's something that's used for everything else. So divorce, estate, auction, and that's an open marketplace. And that's really where we see a lot of confusion. And when an artist, or a client like yours, Anita, that may call with a conversation about or asking about a piece like that, where Sotheby's or Christie's or one of the auction houses mentions that the value is now higher than what we appraised it for several years ago, we would certainly want to let them know that we will look at both markets and provide them with a comparable value based on what their need is, whether it be retail replacement value for insurance or fair market value if they're looking at potentially selling, potentially estate planning or donation, etc.
Kate, we have a question from one of our participants who is asking a question about jewelry. So for insurance purposes, do you use retail replacement value for jewelry?
Correct. And that's something that sometimes some of the things that we see is clients will go online and or anybody, any of their advisors or people working with them, and they may look at current diamond pricing or current market pricing for metals, precious stones, and those don't take into consideration a lot of the work that goes in to pieces. And so obviously when we're looking at any jewelry, we really want a retail replacement value for insurance, because if the person creating that piece were to buy the stone and the metal, there would certainly be an upcharge in the retail for the artistic portion of it, for the time involved and all the additional details that go into marketing and advertising, et cetera, on the piece.
So, so Kate, here we are, all at home, working remotely, and we have our things that we've looked at every single day surrounding us, that we've inherited and we've acquired. Is there something we can be doing while we're home to get our ducks in a row, so when this all ends, we can, make sure we come out of it better organized and communicating what we have to our families?
Absolutely. And so I have many friends and family members that I've been working on this with. Some of them, getting the whole family involved, whether it be to have children help count up pieces, or potentially they have family staying with them, so grandparents who know quite a bit about a piece that maybe they don't know. So it's an excellent time to really go through, and you can do room by room, or you can do type of object. So maybe focus on the art, then focus on the furniture. Number one, I would say absolutely document it. Take photographs of every wall and the pieces. Take a video. We all have iPhones or any sort of a phone with video capability, and Palmal is happy to turn those into a video for you, an edited video for you. You can send us the information and all the clips, and we can do that for you. The other part of that is you want to make sure that you're creating a list and photographing what's in your home. The burden of proof is on you if something were to happen, to be able to prove that you own things. And clients don't want to be going back through Facebook, trying to find pictures from holidays past to show pictures of things. So being able to go through and photograph all the assets in a room. I usually do wall by wall, and then I focus in with clients to the individual assets within a wall. Any of the items that the client or anyone feels that are significant, whether they be personally significant or financially significant, they can certainly take additional information that matches the list that's on the screen and send them to us. You can always email and say, is this worth appraising? And we would be happy to have a conversation with you about it. We also at Palmal have an internal system for being able to manage your tangibles. It is a fairly basic system, and it allows for putting in photos, cataloging, matching receipts and documentation. And that's something that we can also provide to clients and to their advisors, and certainly reach out to us. And it's a very basic system, I like to say, and coming from somebody who's not great at technology, it's very easy to use. And also being able to go through and, looking at that box of receipts that's been sitting in a corner for years, that's been piling up as you've made purchases, or you've been given things and they give you a gift receipt, or they give you the folder with the information from the gallery or the place of purchase. Now's a really good time to go through and match that. And like I said, the other part of that is planning. So being able to have conversations with loved ones, whether it be Skype or sitting in your living room together, to make sure that you're getting all that information. If it's an inherited piece, having the family discuss where it came from and why it's important. These are all things that can be done completely, they're things that can be done while you have time. They can be family friendly, and they're great ways to document what you own.
Thanks, Kate. I have two questions. One is related to insurance. And so one participant is asking, what's the typical turnaround for a complimentary schedule review?
A complimentary schedule review usually takes, it depends on the size of the schedule. It depends on the type of objects, but typically we have it back in 2 to 3 days. If it's incredibly large or incredibly complicated, that could get a little bit longer. And if it's a little bit smaller or incredibly well detailed, it could be in 24 hours. But we'll communicate with whoever sends us the schedule and ask any questions.
Thank you so much. And also, just to let everyone know, it's a complimentary service. We don't charge for schedule reviews. So this is something, feel free when you're doing your annual review with your client. We're happy to review your schedule as well. Kate, thank you so much. I have one more question from one of our participants, and this is from Angulus Group. They're they are bonds, they have an art bond program, and there's a question about value. Looking at the impact of COVID on values, upwards of, since a bond is a 5 to 7 year hold, what's the anticipated, change in value? It's very easy to answer that question. Like I said previously, if you're looking at all of the categories of analysis that determine value, and if it is a true blue chip asset, which has a B+ or more next to each of those categories of analysis, I anticipate that it will hold its value and or go up in value depending on the area of the marketplace. So what you're really looking for is quality in terms of, a value over time. So all your blue chip, strong, really good works of art, I believe, will hold their value and will continue to go up in value. We've seen a much bigger uptick in millennial acquisitions, and as a result, the post-war contemporary market, I believe, will continue to dominate over the impressionist and modern market because of the new interest in millennials in acquisitions. So certainly post-war contemporary, I think, will be the dominant area for growth, but certainly modern and impressionism, really, really solid good works will hold their value, and some will continue to go up in value as well. Well, folks, that is an hour. We thank you all for coming to this webinar. Please feel free to shoot us an email if you'd like a copy of this PowerPoint. We're happy to share it with you. In addition, we'll be putting together notes from the webinar, which we will summarize, and we're happy to send out to you as well. Everyone have a good day. Be very safe, and please reach out to us if you have absolutely any questions. Thanks again.